Welcome. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. And we're so delighted that you've welcomed us into your home. We know what a privilege that is. We want you to send us an email with a question or a comment to jimandjoy@ewtn.com. We certainly would love to hear from you. Well, today we have a wonderful young man, a father, Joe Sakura, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's the author of a book called Defying Grace.
No, Defying Gravity.
Defying Gravity. How Choosing Joy Lifted My Family from Death to Life. And this book is available on EWTN Religious Catalog. And you could get in touch with him, go to his website, Joe Sakura, Sikorra.com, joesakura.com.
Well, this is a very special show.
Yes.
And just the title of the book says so much, Defying Gravity, How Choosing Joy Lifted My Family from Death to Life. It's Joe, his wife Lori, son John, son Ben, kind of like a regular, normal kind of Catholic family, until they got a diagnosis with their firstborn child of this juvenile Batten disease, which I've never heard of, but it's a fatal disease. And you can just imagine the trauma of that, and Joe will share about how that goes along, and it's not a very pleasant disease at all. And so they're kind of riding that wave. Have another son, these kids are beautiful, John and Ben. The next child gets the same diagnosis, okay? So not one child with a terminal diagnosis, two children with a terminal diagnosis, you know? And so they're telling the story about this and the stress of that on your life, on his marriage. How do you live this way? How special these kids are, beautiful these kids are, athletic kids, and so gifted in so many ways, yet they're going through this. One of the things with this disease is blindness and loss of memory, and difficult. But they're choosing life.
Yes.
They're choosing joy. And they come to this place where they understand that Jesus said, deny yourself, take up the cross and follow me. That we all have crosses in our lives. And they said, we're going to take this up and we're going to live every day. And we're going to defy the gravity of death. Defy, I mean, it's a reality, defy the pull, defy the depression, and we're going to live. We're going to choose joy. And joy is more than an emotion.
Right.
Joy is a product of giving yourself to God, of surrendering to God, of surrendering everything to God, and to say that nothing will separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. This family really does that beautifully. Their story is very relatable, because in this world you're going to have tribulation. And Jesus said, but be of good cheer. I've overcome this world.
Well, you know, when we were going through everything, all I kept thinking was though you slay me, I will trust you. And I thought of Job, and you just think, it isn't fair, right? And Joe describes it so well about the fairness and the reality of it, and the struggle and the pain and the sorrow, but yet the joy of it. And with the intentional decision, you have to trust God in the midst of it all.
Defying Gravity, How Choosing Joy Lifted My Family from Death to Life. We'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and today we bring to you Joe Sakura. He is the author of a book called Defying Gravity. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he's going to teach us a lot today. You can go to his website, joesakura.com. Well, Joe, we're excited to have you here, and part of your claim to fame is at some point in time, you did live in New Jersey.
Yes, I did.
So this is good.
And it's a beautiful place.
There you go. That's good.
Good answer, good answer. Well, first we want you to tell our family, how did you come to this title of Defying Gravity? And how did you come to write this book?
It's a great question. First of all, the title was actually given to me by a dear, dear friend of mine who was a psychologist and knows my family very well and knew our story and that we were struggling with our kids who had this devastating, debilitating, degenerative disease. And he watched our life and he said, man, you just keep moving, you just keep getting back up, no matter the hardships. And when I came to write the book, he said, I've got the title. I thought, well, that's kind of presumptuous. I said, but okay. And he said, Defying Gravity. He said, because you just keep marching. And I said, okay, I got it. As long as I don't have to tell anybody that you came up with the title. Now I just did. So there you go.
Yeah. Joe, let's talk about defying gravity. And what do you mean? What do you mean when you say gravity? I was sharing it early in the show that it's a pull.
Yeah.
I mean, gravity's real. You can't deny gravity.
Right.
But we do see astronauts in their little space thing, and they reach zero gravity, and they're moving around. You know, so that's true too. That you can break the force of gravity spiritually, so to speak.
Yeah.
What was the gravity in your situation?
Well, I married my high school sweetheart. I know you started dating very young, got married, and we had dreams and aspirations, as most young couples do, of having children and the perfect life, and we had it all mapped out. But we had a very interesting conversation before we were married, and we were probably 20 years old, and we were sitting on this dock overlooking the bay. It's not just a song, it's a real location in Florida. We were talking about kids, and my wife said, what if we had disabled kids? Now, it's kind of an unusual question to pose. And somehow we said, we would be okay. And we forgot about that conversation. We never had it again until our kids were diagnosed with this very rare fatal disease. But Defying Gravity resonated for me with the book because life will always conspire to take you down. As a therapist, I work with people who are struggling, who are suicidal, who are struggling with a marriage or depression or anxiety. There's so much around us that will bring us down. Now, I think as Catholics, as Christians, we have this wonderful opportunity to actually embrace what God offers us. Wow. This blows me away when I think about it. Yeah. God's Holy Spirit living, breathing, moving, guiding us. What gravity can actually hold you down? It might conspire to want to take you down, but we have so much to actually lift us back up.
Yes, and I'm just thinking as you're sharing, there's some kind of martial arts where you don't resist the blow that's coming at you, you go with the blow.
Right.
So actually, you could go with this gravity because there is the gospel of suffering. So that which is meant to pull us down even into the pit of hell and to torture us,
right,
and our families and so on, that there's something about, that Jesus bore so much of that, and out of that comes forgiveness, comes the cross, comes salvation, resurrection. So there's a part of that where God could use that, what the enemy means for evil. Not that you look for it and say, oh, just bring it on me, I want to be a martyr or whatever, but you could even use the gravity.
Right, right. Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow. Now, I don't think he says, pick up your cross and you will be miserable. He says, pick up your cross and my joy will be your joy. So it's a real paradox, the whole, I think, message of the gospel. It's not necessarily, it's easy to misunderstand, but God does offer us joy. His ways are different than our ways. You mentioned joy in the introduction. You were talking about the book of Job, and I wrestled with that too, because who is Job? Job was a good man. Good people suffer. Good people struggle. And Job was plagued. And the whole book of Job, he had his fixers around him, his friends who were saying, Job, this is the reason why you're suffering. This is the struggle. And at the end, God steps in, and he tells the friends again, you don't get it, you don't understand, and Job, you don't either. You may not understand the reason for the suffering, but look for me. Enter into the suffering, and you will find me there, and you will find joy.
Yeah.
So it really, it's not easy, but you have to choose it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a cancer survivor, and 2 times during cancer, that horrible journey, which I called it to hell and back. Once, I really believe the Lord said to me, Joy, you're in a valley, find the lilies in the valley. And then the other one was just a horrible night where I thought it was the dark night of my soul and I was about to die, was dance with me in this fire. Because it's testing. Do you love me more than this? No matter what. Like, my son, really, Lord? you know, my marriage. I mean, oh, those are all good and beautiful things that God gave to you, that he blessed us with, right? Our children, our marriages, they're all good things. And then say, but you take them away, and now you still want me to bend my knee and say, yes, you're the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and I love you?
Joe, tell us, bring us to that time. You know, I mean, you're married. How long are you married? What was your life like? And then something's going on with your kids' eyesight. You know, that doesn't seem like too big of it. And then, so what's happening? What's going on?
Well, I guess you could say we were pursuing the dream as a family. I was pursuing the dream. I thought I was actually responding to God's call to be an actor. Right. I don't think I was right, but that's what I thought at the time. Married, you know, happily married. We had our struggles like most couples. Thank God we started to come back together. And I was playing baseball outside. We had just bought our first home, which is a miracle in itself in Los Angeles. Right. And I was playing baseball with my son in the front yard, and threw the ball to him. He missed it, and I thought, wow, he's a really bad baseball player. And I said, John, get the ball. It's right behind you. And he looked around, and he said, where is it, Daddy? And he started looking around. I thought, oh, this isn't good. Long story short, we went to an optometrist. He said, the eyes don't look good. We went to an ophthalmologist. He said, the eyes don't look good. Sent us to a geneticist. After about 5 different sets of doctors, they came back with this devastating disease. It was Ash Wednesday, I'll never forget. And they said, your son has this disease. And we were devastated. It's one thing to think, okay, I can bear this cross, but to see your children and say, this is what they're facing. Pretty difficult. And then they said, by the way, you have another son, right? And I said, yes, but he's fine, we said. They said, well, get him checked. And you know, a few months later, we were told that he also suffers from the same disease, fatal disease. So how does a young couple, really just starting their married life, raise children knowing that they're going to have, you know, years to live? Because kids typically die from this juvenile Batten disease, late teens, early 20s. So my son was 7 when we were given this diagnosis, my oldest son. And so I thought, okay, we've got to figure this out. We got to figure out how to actually find joy in the midst of this struggle.
What are the symptoms of this disease? How does it work?
Kids are typically diagnosed around the age of 7 because there aren't symptoms typically before then, and they start losing their sight. It goes over a period of several years. Early teens, they develop seizures, cognitive, motor skill deficits. You know, usually they require feeding tubes towards the end of their life, seizures. So it's very complicated.
But from birth to 7, I mean, all his pediatric exams, everything was okay.
No, normal. Yeah. No sign.
So then that is, to say that is a total shock and surprise for you and Lori, it's like, what?
Yeah, totally devastating.
So you're people of faith.
Yeah.
Are you strong in your faith at this time?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, my wife was Baptist, Southern Baptist, when we got married, and we actually had, when we got married, her Southern Baptist minister, my Catholic priest, we did the marriage. And he told us, he said, and this was wise on his part, like, unbelievable that he said this, but he said, you guys have to get together on this. And he said, Joe, I'd love for you to be Baptist, but I don't think that's going to happen. So he said, Lori, you should probably become Catholic, which is amazing.
That is amazing.
But he recognized that couples have to come together. They have to have this united faith, even though we experience faith differently. So I was, you know, born and raised Catholic. My faith was always real. I would say I never really deviated from it, but this was a challenge. You can no longer say, oh yes, I believe. When you're faced with this kind of devastation, this kind of loss, you have to say, wait a second, what do I really believe? What is this really all about? Because how do you understand this kind of suffering with children? And people ask that all the time. They say, well, how can there be a loving God if you suffer? You know?
Yeah, it's a huge question. We deal with that quite a bit, you know, in our pro-life center, where we're seeing girls in crisis pregnancy come in, and we've seen tens of thousands of little children in utero through these ultrasounds. And we know that 80% of the girls we work with are going to choose life, but 20% don't. And then you think about these children, and you're looking at these children, and you're thinking about, you know, what is going on. And I've had the privilege of burying over 30 aborted babies and seeing them. And it is a real challenge because, and even now it's 60 million abortions in America. And from time to time, I do speak to the Lord. It's like, what are you waiting for? Or how could this be 60 million abortions? And how could it be someone so innocent and helpless and has not committed any sin and pure? And, there's a lot of other people, if we have to take them out or something, why these? Why this? But, and that's what you're saying. Why a child? Why, bring it on me, pick on somebody, who's bigger. But Jesus was all of those things. I was just meditating on that as I was thinking about speaking with you, that Jesus was the purest of the pure and the most humble of the humble, and he intentionally and willfully entered into that, and he suffered everything. So those are the questions you were asking. What is my faith really about? How does this all fit?
Right. Well, I was watching your show where you were talking about pro-life, and I was thinking about that. Most people, for instance, to talk about life, they choose an abortion. Why? Because they're afraid, because they think their lives are going to be miserable. Yeah. Now, if a parent were given our diagnosis in utero, right, what would they choose? They go, oh my gosh, we can't do this. This child, they'll be miserable, the parents will be miserable. That's not true. Right. That's not true.
Okay.
And that's what I speak about in this book, hopefully very honestly, is yes, along with the suffering, along with the fears that we've had to face, we've experienced unbelievable miracles, unbelievable blessings. And if you can get people beyond the fear, oh, this is going to be life, it's going to be miserable. We don't guess well. I can tell you as a therapist, we look into the future and we think, oh, how will I deal with cancer? You're going to do better than you think. God made us wonderfully resilient.
Right.
You might not have the answers, but there are answers.
Right.
Tell us, as the show is going by so quickly, tell us about John, the first one diagnosed, and about him.
Both John and Ben changed lives with their life. We got a lot of attention. The boys got a lot of attention. When your kids are blind, when they have seizures, you seem to attract a lot of attention, but they changed lives. John, God rest his soul, he died at age 24 a few years ago, but he lived a completely full and amazing life. I taught him to drive when he was blind.
That's amazing.
Maybe I shouldn't say
That's
that.
a whole show.
It was actually a very funny story. But one day he said to me, he goes, Dad, why can't I drive? And I was like, because you're blind. And I didn't say that. I just said, I don't know. He said, can you teach me to drive? I said, okay. And I was a cop at the time. I said, okay. And I had an off-road vehicle. I had a Jeep. It was great. So I took him out to the desert, and I said, all right, John, here's the gas brakes. This is what you do.
Wow.
We went out, and he learned how to drive. We ran
Amazing.
over a few cactus and everything else, but I mean, it was...
But he was driving.
He felt
He
it.
drove.
Yeah.
He water skied. He snow skied blind. We have video pictures of him. I mean, he defied gravity.
Yeah.
He didn't say, these are my limitations. He said, again, with God, all things are possible. And that's what we had to embrace.
Right.
That's right.
And that challenges the human spirit, right? Because so many people say, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. And John was saying, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
Right? And so that just really challenges the human spirit as to everyone say, that's not for me, that I can't do that. Well, yes, you can. You've never tried.
Yeah.
Right?
We're going to take a break at this point, and we're going to come right back. It's Defying Gravity, How Choosing Joy Lifted My Family from Death to Life. It's a word that we all need to hear. We'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, today we're visiting with Joe Sakura, but before we continue our discussion with him, we're going to hear from Catherine Hadro, who is the host of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Catherine, the March for Life is right around the corner, and what do you have planned this week?
Hi, Jim and Joy. Yes, Planned Parenthood recently released their annual report, and to no surprise, it shows a continued uptick in abortions. We will have expert analysis to look into the latest numbers and what it reveals about the abortion industry. Also this week, we speak with Father Jeff Kirby. He is a Catholic priest on a mission to educate the faithful about Catholic teaching on end-of-life medical care. You will want to pay attention to the wisdom he shares. And as we do each and every week, we tell you how you can get involved in the pro-life movement right from your very own home. All you have to do is follow our weekly call to action by going to prolifeweekly.com. At this website, we'll tell you the action you can take this week to advance the pro-life cause. Again, that is prolifeweekly.com. You can catch all of this and more on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern and again on Sunday at 10 a.m. But for now, back to you at home.
Catherine, thanks so much for keeping the gospel of life front and center. Joe, we just have a couple of minutes left, and I'm thinking about your wife, Lori. Yeah. And I did see a video. I don't know who it was put out by. It may have been the Batten Disease Organization or something. And John was still living then, and Ben, and I saw your wife's face, beautiful person. But I tell you, her face at that point with those kids and what she was sharing, I mean, I thought of Our Lady of Sorrows. You could see, and you can hear faith, but I mean, the reality's there in her eyes and what life is like with two children with terminal. And one of the things she said was that, we used to project out what will we do with our family 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now. So it's not that anymore. It's just day to day. What does God want for us today? Speak a little bit about Lori and her journey and all of this.
She, well, like any mother, would really struggle with this. Why? How do I do this? It was a real challenge. And Lori, growing up Baptist, didn't have a real connection with Mary, of course, right? The Rosary. And one time we went to Medjugorje. We were sent there, and I had, quite honestly at that time, never heard of the place. I said, what? And Lori was praying. One night, John was exhausted after a long day, and he was like asleep, and we were pushing him around in a cart or something. And we were walking around the Stations of the Cross. And Lori was looking at Mary there, looking at Jesus on the cross. And she said, how do I do this, Mary? She was asking to be spoken from a mother with this terrible disease. And she goes, how did you do it? And she had a realization at that moment. I get choked up thinking about it. But my Baptist wife, who became Catholic. But she said, you've got to give your child to me, Lord. God was speaking to her. And she said, she came to this realization. She said, I will lose my child, my children, but not like that, not on the cross. They will be surrounded by love, by family, by us. You know, they won't know that kind of abandonment or desolation. And that was a real consolation. Didn't solve all the problems, didn't take the pain away completely, but it was comforting.
But the sword still pierced Lori's heart.
Yeah, sure.
And what an epiphany, right? For her to see and to know, and then to understand that Mary's going to take John and you and Ben in her arms too, as we all go through this journey.
Yeah.
Well, you related so beautifully to the Holy Family. And we have a faith that says God is family. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is family. Jesus is born into a family. You're a family. And you had it a little bit easier than Mary did in that, like you said, they're going to be surrounded with love. That's what we need to be committed to as a family. We're going to surround our loved ones, our elderly, our infirm, our children that are battling, and we're going to do this together in community and be face to face with the ultimate community. Well, thanks for sharing with us. We look forward to continuing this conversation, packing your life more fully on Friday. It's Joe Sakura, Defying Gravity, How Choosing Joy Lifted My Family from Death to Life. And so defying gravity is for all of us. It's coming our way. Jesus said, in this world you're going to have tribulation, but he emphasized, but be of good cheer now, for I have overcome this world. Remember, One Life LA is this Saturday. You can get all the coverage on EWTN 4:30 this Saturday, Eastern Time. So keep it on EWTN. All together, we're building a new culture of life. You're always at home with Jim and Joy. Bye now.